Hi everybody, it's Colin Stevenson here, joined again by my hero, John Lenhart. Hi John.
Hi.
Today is massive again because every time that you tell me a story, you top the last one. Now, SC Johnson Wax came and took you from Dial, okay? And this was you going up against Dow, the 2-year contract, you're not allowed to speak. What was it? What was the contract called?
Non-compete.
The non-compete contract. That's we don't have it in Europe. So the non-compete contract is now up. You've done what you've had to do with Dial, and now it's time to go up against Dow. So this is you couldn't write this as a script in a film. So if you could please just tell me.
I end up going to SC Johnson Wax. This is in Racine, Wisconsin, and they wanted to get Shout to be number one. It had never been number one in its 17-year history. It had always lost to Spray and Watch, which was the Dow Brands product. They hired a consultant group from Harvard, and that consulting group said, you need to hire somebody who has a detergent background. That proves that the detergent and the soil and stain are totally different. No one had ever done that. They said, you need to hire this guy with this detergent background. I interviewed, they hired me. I was the youngest person by 10 years in the company. I had 7.5 years experience by this time. They paid me like I had 15. So this is again, I had a lot of offers at Dial. This was a very sweet offer. But I was the youngest person by 10 years. All my peers were at least 10 years older. Now, when I was at Dow, I was INTP.
Yeah.
At Johnson Wax, I became ENTP. So if you see the symbolism here, it's 4 companies, 4 different Myers-Briggs. The Myers-Briggs predicted it, but the I and the E changed depending on Procter & Gamble to Dial. Those two beat each other. And then, so those were perfect NTJs. And these 2 companies were perfect NTP. So now as ENTP, I was the debater.
Oh, right, okay.
So the number one attribute is an intellectual. And in this video, all I'm going to do is cover my first 2 years at Johnson Wax being the intellectual.
Can I just ask a question, please?
Yes.
Does this take us back to your dad and your grandma talking and the debating? Is this anything to do with it?
A lot of that ability came out at this point,
yeah.
even all 4 years. I'm not the commander. I'm not the guy in charge running the show. I was hired as this technical expert. I was now being valued for my technical expertise. And so I was back to like a Dow, a chemical company, a researcher, my technical expertise. So this was not going to be my leadership running a group. This was going to be, I was this person who was the smartest guy in the room. I like I said, the suppliers had told everybody and the recruiters had told everybody, this guy is one of the 5 best formulators in the world. He understands surfactants, one of the 5 best to understand surfactants. We get into a meeting with the president of the company and he says, for 17 years, our Shout has been number 1 in consumer tests, number 1 in internal tests, and we're not number 1 in the market. Why? And I say, because we have the wrong internal and consumer tests. Remember, I was at Dial, I modeled everything backwards. You make a bunch of products and then you do the internal test. If it doesn't pass, you make a bunch of products. If it passes, you do the consumer. If it doesn't pass, and then you go to the market and it fails. What I did at Dial was I went backwards. I understood the market, I went backwards. So I said that, and that promptly got me banned from data for a year.
And did you have a non-compete with Dial at this point?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So this is where we're going back to Dow. So it got you banned completely.
From data. So my first year at Johnson Wax, because of that comment, the people in charge of market research they weren't going to give me any data. My point was, you give me the data and I'll show you how to do this. I did this at Dial. Banned. So my first year was me not doing anything. So this is when I picked up the coaching again. I coached basketball. I coached a boys and a girls team. I coached football. I was doing all these different things. One of the things that happens kind of funny in a sad way, I guess, is that when I was at Dial, the person I replaced went and got a job at the water treatment plant. And the salary they were making was almost half what I was making at Dial. And that made me go, if the engineers at the water treatment plant are getting paid less than every other engineer in the world, how good can they be? I only drank bottled water once. I wouldn't drink tap water once I worked at Dial. When I got to Johnson Wax, wouldn't drink tap water. We had a cryptosporidium scare, and people actually died over it because of the tap water. And I wasn't surprised. Water is a big part of what I dealt with. I understand water. I knew I understood water better than the waste treatment people. During my time at Johnson Wax, I would go to the water treatment plant and start talking about different measures and different things I needed. They weren't even measuring the right things. I also, now this is when the internet, I like to call them the interwebs to show how old I am, the interwebs comes up. Because I have all this free time. And I start connecting with my high school drama friends. Remember, this is a group of intellectuals who were in all these different fields, and we start connecting through email and start writing these emails, and we form this group. And these people are just brilliant people. And Gordy, what would Gordy do is in that group. And when I look back on those emails, I was really learning people's uniqueness and healthy communication and a lot of those things that I ended up modeling later. That's why I learned it. But I was spending a lot of time with these intellectuals and sharing about stuff and sharing about what I was doing and what I was going through. Now, also during this time, Procter & Gamble went through their first layoff in the history of the company. They laid off 13,000 people. And in the Wall Street Journal, I think it's the second paragraph, said the reason they're doing this is from pressure from value consumer products companies and products like Purex from Dial. So I kind of got my award while I was at Johnson Wax that, yes, what I had done had taken it right out of the hide of their major money earners. I was making a product that I would say was 80% as good as Tide, but I was making it at 40 or 50% the cost. And these value products took off, and all those things I did, saving money and making better products, yeah, it took its toll on Procter & Gamble. So during this downtime, I felt like, okay, I know it feels hard to feel good about myself when I'm not allowed to do anything, but I know what I did. I can still do it. I had a boss who was Irish, and he had worked internationally, and he hooked me up with some people in Europe, and they were having an issue. So I got to do some work. And the issue was they had a product that got rid of the hard water stains in toilets. Far and better than what was out there. Yep. They did a consumer test, and it got rated way ahead of the other product for cleaning toilets. And it lost overall to the other product. And they could not figure out why. Why? Again, reality. We said this product does this better than this. You said, yes, it does, but you still like this other product. They could not figure out why it was. And I said, send me the data. So they sent me all this data in all these Excel spreadsheets. And so this was me doing work for Europe, doing what I normally do. Now remember, when you look at a product, if I give you a product to test and you use it one time, you are going to measure the convenience of the product. If it's hard to open, and that's the only time you use it, you're going to say, I don't like this product. It's hard to use. If you use it 2 times, because the second time you use it, you're like, I know how to use it now. You smell it, you look at the aesthetics. Once you get to 3, 4, 5, or 6 times, you will start valuing the performance. So the first thing was I cut all the data on how many times the people used the product. People, because a person who used the product once and valued it for convenience was counted the same as a person who used it twice and valued it aesthetics versus someone who actually used the product and could value the performance. So I cut the data that way. Then, as I worked through the data, I noticed something. Among people who would use the product several times, they rated their product down because it streaked on bathroom mirrors. So the company had put the product in a trigger sprayer for the toilet versus some sort of spout. People used it and went, wow, that cleans the toilet great. Maybe they'll clean the glass in the bathroom.
Oh, no.
Sprayed the mirror, it streaked and went, I hate this product. What are you measuring and how are you measuring it? The form of the product, remember the opaque bottle with Dawn?
Yeah.
The form of the product was distracting the consumer from the intended benefit. I told them, they said to them, this is going to clean the toilet. They said it does clean the toilet and I hate it. Get it out of the trigger. They moved it out of the trigger so they couldn't use it on the mirrors. Boom. So I had helped this part of the company in Europe introduce this product because of my data analysis and because of what I understood about consumers' brains. And you look at this and you go, logically, we should get this rating. You're not taking in everything and you're not really understanding how people actually think.
So now we're past psychology, we're past product, we're now at like the biggest system, like looking over people as a whole, and that's where you've taken it from, not from the one mind, but from the umbrella as such, and you're looking down from the aerial view.
Right. So I did that. I modeled the entire United States. I was able to get sales data. And I looked over the entire United States and I modeled it according to water hardness, water temperature, and detergents that were sold because we're the soil and stain remover. Now, we had a trigger sprayer, we had a liquid squeeze, we had an aerosol, we had a stick. And I started noticing that certain products were used in certain markets. And as phosphates got banned, certain forms started doing better than other forms. And I was able to predict, I was able to look at what had been happening over the last 5 years. So I came up with a prediction of what the market would look like in the next year. And that was given the marketing.
Yep.
And that was my bet. The only way I can get back to the data was I went all the way to the end and modeled the market. So they weren't allowing me with the consumer testing. They weren't allowing me with the internal testing. So I went to the market. I modeled the market and said, this is why these forms sell different places. And this is what's going to happen in the next year because these other things are happening. By the end of that year, everything I predicted came true. So now marketing pushed back on market research and said, give this guy the data. Let's figure out what's really going on.
So you get banned and they've taken you, they're paying you a wage for you to pretty much go and do your time with other things.
Right.
When they could have initially given you the data and been much further ahead than what they could have been, so they shot themselves in the foot.
Right. And I had to learn to just take it, basically. So, but again, I'm a debater. I'm not the leader. I'm not the commander. I couldn't make stuff happen. One of the things I started realizing, so when I got into the consumer testing, one of the things was that we were always winning the test for aesthetics. Our products smelled better than spray and wash. Our lemony shout smelled better than spray and wash. So we were always winning for that, but we were never winning for cleaning. And I was cutting the data with what we call heavy users. Did they use the product more than once? Just what I learned with the Europe situation. And I was able to show them, why are you testing with everybody? Something like, and I'm going to make up a number here, 20% of the people who bought Shout accounted for 2/3 of the sales.
Okay.
Why don't we rate them? Why don't we, everything I did at Dial, why don't we go where liquid detergents sell and test with those people? So I was bringing all this information in And what I realized is that their test method, they couldn't get a significant win, statistically significant. And if you ran the numbers, knowing the statistics, so it's my math league, permutations, probabilities,
yeah,
the base size they would have needed to run. Like they do the test with 100 people and it costs them, let's say, $50,000 to run that test. They'd have to run it with 5,000 people. It was going to cost like $1 million or whatever to get the statistical number. So I'm showing them all the statistics and saying, your consumer testing, you're never going to get a win for that. And our internal testing is using Tide to clean everything. And this is always funny. Every company I was at, this always would happen with marketing, is we put a soil on a piece of cloth and we wash it in our stuff and we wash it in somebody else. And ours cleans at 90% and theirs cleans at 60. Marketing goes, why didn't clean at 100%? Well, you need to see a difference. In the lab, you need to see a difference. You don't want that soil 100% gone. We're artificially making it tough to clean because we have to see a difference. Yeah, but it's not 100%, didn't get it clean. If I get it 100% clean, then I don't know if it got 107% clean. And it was so frustrating to deal with marketing all these companies because they just were not scientifically, thinking. What I ended up doing is they were using Tide, which has enzymes and everything in it. No one needs to buy a soil and stain remover if they're going to use Tide. There's no reason for it. The people and so I had them do a test where they asked people, they kept a diary and asked them what their detergent was. Everybody said they used Tide and Whisk because they're the biggest one. And I had them ask what color was the bottle.
And they didn't know anything.
They were not using Tide and Whisk. They knew that name branding, but that's not what they were actually using. And that opened everything up because you can't really see the benefit of our product if you're using a detergent that cleans everything. Yeah. The reason why people were buying a soil and stain remover is they were buying a product like Purex that didn't have any enzymes in it, and then they were using this. And I knew everything about Purex, and I knew everything about the value brands, and I said value brands are taking off. The market share, when you test this, the market share of Tide and Whisk is at 80%.
Yeah.
But in the market, they're both combined at like 20%. There's no way you're measuring reality.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So I helped them change their consumer test. And one of the things I did in the consumer test was I came up with this Delta method, I called it. Because what would happen is if you had 3 products, they'd test A against B and A would win. They'd test B against C and B would win. They'd test A against C and C would win. And the reason why is when you're testing the product against something you're used to, you're looking at performance. When you're testing 2 products that you're not used to, you're looking at aesthetics, how they smell. I had everybody rate. The other issue is let's say you have a 7-point scale and you ask everybody rate this. Well, if you rate product A at 6 and product B at 5, and I rate product A at 4 and product B at 3, we both think A is 1 unit better. But when you run all the numbers together, the statistics are all jumbling.
Yeah.
So I came up with this Delta method where I had everybody rate their product versus the product they use most often. So now you're always going up or down from a fixed point. That lowered the base size. I ended up showing how to do a consumer test for 1/10 the money in half the time, and it gave statistical significance difference for the first time in the history of the company. And the vice president of research had me share what I was doing with the entire company. So this is how you start pulling all this together. You start understanding people, you start understanding statistics and my math team stuff, and you start understanding how these products work. We ended up getting the base size down and more accurate. Then I changed the internal test to mirror 3 conditions. Rather than have this 150 conditions, there were 3 conditions that modeled the United States. We took 6 weeks to reformulate Shout. Within 6 months, it was #1 for the first time in its history. A year later, we bought Dow Brands.
What? You literally bought them? You didn't just go up against them, but now they're no more.
We bought
That's absolutely mega. So, but did you get another award for this, or did you just know that was what you did anyway?
Well, one of the things I learned is credit is infinite.
Yeah.
Rather than take all the credit, I was always pointing to everybody else, and that's how things got out the door. A year in the penalty box helped me realize I better share the credit with everybody. I did get to give a talk at the New Horizons convention for the American Marketing Association on how I did it. So
Wow.
I did give a national talk on Coronado Island about how we did this, because it was just absolutely revolutionary at the time. But that was how I ended up taking it out of Dow Brands.
So you've literally just revolutionized a company, a multi-million or billion-dollar now company, from just coming in and looking at people, the consumer, the way that they're using it, and how they mark down how they feel about the product. It wasn't even about coming back and using the the surfactants and things like that anymore.
No, it was all, you're right. It was all marketing, human driven. And it was these 4 steps. I was going to model the market and then change the consumer test to mirror the market, change the internal test to mirror the consumer test. Now we only need 6 weeks to formulate. And the market went, yep, number 1. So I don't know why everybody, the intellectual, the debater, why is everybody doing product development this way? Why aren't we doing it backwards? We should be doing something with psychology.
Yeah.
So the last thing I'll say about this is I was dealing with my friends from high school.
Yeah.
And I started noticing that there were 4 principles that always determined truth. I would watch the History Channel. These people were all big time intellectuals, and I was trying to learn. And when I watched the History Channel, it didn't matter the field, medicine, religion, war, politics, art. Every time the story fell apart, at least one of these 4 principles weren't used. And you and I have covered these 4 principles in a video on what is science. Science is a tool for determining truth. And science is these 4 principles: causality, non-contradiction, growth mindset, which means being quick to admit you're wrong. It doesn't mean I like to grow. It means quick to admit you're wrong, and contrastive thinking, actively looking for how I could be wrong. When you do a Sudoku puzzle, you use all 4 of those to complete the Sudoku puzzle. I had now had these 4 principles where I felt like I was the greatest problem solver in the world. So rather than being the surfactant guy, rather than being this formulator guy, I'm dealing with humans, I'm modeling humans, and I believed that these 4 principles, I could solve any problem in the world. That's why I was doing it. In fact, my dad at this time became a pastor. And the issue, remember I said he was speaking about cults.
Yeah.
And he was doing what we would call a resolve or a solve, which is after someone's in a cult, how do you identify a cult? How do you help them out of a cult? And my point to him was, I know 4 principles that determine truth. If everybody were taught these 4 principles, a cult would never work.
Yep.
Why don't you teach these people these 4 principles? And he became a pastor. So part of the deal was I felt like I was improving on all this stuff he was talking about with cults. And I started looking into all these cults and going, man, you can take every cult apart with these 4 principles. That's all you have to do is look at that. Now I'm in this group. What would Gordy do? I'm becoming more Gordy. I'm being more of the debater, more of the intellectual, and I'm absolutely taking on anybody. I have 4 principles that's going to help me deal with anybody. Bring it on. I want to take on anybody. So that's my first 2 years at Johnson Wax. At the end of my first 2 years, the vice president of R&D said to me, where do you want to work in this company? He opened up to me where I wanted to work because I'd proven what I could do. And I decided I wanted to go work for the most subjective area. I felt like soil and stain movers were the most objective. I could completely mirror what's happening in someone's house. I wanted to understand the most subjective, and that was fragrances.
Right. Okay.
So in our next episode, I'm going to show you how I continue to be the debater and deal with fragrances.
Magic. Well, I can't wait, and I'm looking forward to hearing about it. And you've got my mind ticking over. So thank you so much again for this next stage. And the fragrance part is where people will find probably some of the story in your blog spot on the Flowcess website. So flowcess.com, blogspot, and you will find some of this story if they don't want to wait. But I would advise them to wait for this video. So thank you so much, John. I will speak to you soon. Take it easy.